In episode 3, after thinking about it for a short time, Peter tells Diane that they'll be at the White House in an hour, which is something that Rose is against. She doesn't trust Diane. When they get off the phone, Rose rips into Peter for telling Diane that they'll come in, and he reminds her that it was an order. He didn't have a choice. But what he can't wrap his head around is what happened to Hawkins. Not so much that he was killed, but the fact that he turned, because he had a spotless reputation. So what caused him to all of a sudden work for the other side? He also points out that she doesn't have the resources to access the drive. So if they want to find out what's inside, they're going to have to go in, because the White House does have that access. And then finally, he trusts Diane. A year ago, Diane came to him and offered him this position. She didn't judge him on who his dad was. She judged him on who he was. So he's loyal to her. He decides to call Diane up and tell her that Rose is just a little jumpy at the moment. He asks her, why was Hawkins in that field? They don't have any information as of now. Diane reverts the conversation back to Rose, asking Peter, what do you want to do about her? And Peter says, just give us till 10 a.m. After they hang up the phone, Diane has to go and attend the presidential briefing about what went down with Hawkins. One interesting person who's in this briefing is that guy that was on the phone with the assassin's handlers. The guy who had a, quote, vested interest. So not only is he a DC type, he works as a pretty big high up in the White House. When they wrap up the briefing, the president pulls Diane aside because they have a little bit of a history together, a good one, and she asks what's the latest with Rose, and Diane fills her in. Diane, however, is pissed. She tells the president, I'm in the dark here. I have no idea why Hawkins would pull Rose's security detail, and that's because I don't know what Henry and Emma Campbell were investigating through Night Action to begin with. What were you using them to find? The president decides to fill Diane in. 2 months ago, she had Henry and Emma look into the Metro DC bombing. Intelligence had nothing. She needed to jumpstart this investigation. Now, there was a statement from the People's Independent Front. It's a political group, and they had claimed to take credit for the bombing, but their leaders had said it was forged. It was completely fake. They took no credit for it. It wasn't them. The CIA then spent months listening into their leaders, tapping their phones, and the bombing never came up in conversation, which tipped off the investigators that that statement was actually fake. With that lead dying, the president called on 2 old friends from her Senate intelligence days. What the Campbells ended up finding was the fact that they suspected somebody inside the White House was involved with the Metro bombing. After getting this information, Diane's a little surprised, but she goes home because the next morning she has to be in the office at 10 a.m. for Peter's arrival. Although Peter and Rose don't show up. While Peter trusts Diane, he needed to make sure. He called Diane from his cell phone, something that she would be easily able to track. So if Diane is in fact working for the other side, they'll know if anyone shows up. Early in the morning, Peter and Rose find a hill in the woods to keep an eye on the cabin. And to Peter's surprise, the 2 assassins show up. They're posing as injured hikers, but from afar, Peter recognizes them. Neither Peter or Rose want to stick around, so they end up running over to the car that they stashed and waiting for the group to leave when they figure out that the cabin's empty. They do end up seeing the assassin's car leave. Peter writes down the license plate number. But when the dust settles, he can't believe that Diane had betrayed him. Rose certainly can. She thinks it's pretty obvious. But even after what Peter said about this being the proof that he needed, he still doesn't really believe that it was Diane. There had to be some reason, some other explanation. Either way, Peter knows that he can't take Rose to the White House. He doesn't know he can trust there. So as of now, they're on the run. Peter does have a friend in the police force he can call on to run a license plate for him. At this point, for Peter, the 7 stages of grief are starting to set in. He already went through denial. Now he's at acceptance. But what he can't figure out is how he didn't see it. And what really bothers him is, if he didn't see it, what does it say about him? But Rose now is also willing to look at the other side. She says, devil's advocate, Diane was innocent. That means somebody was able to look at her call log and they tracked us from your phone. So we still can't trust her to keep the hard drive safe, not until we crack it. We also have to figure out who Osprey is and what's happening in 5 days. But all isn't lost, though. Rose does have an idea. She needs to get access to that drive, but her computer doesn't have the capability. So she poses a bold move. She is going to go on the run. Peter is going to show up at the White House so he doesn't raise red flags, and he's going to tell them that she ditched him. Peter is then going to give Diane the drive, and at some point, Peter is going to sneak into Diane's computer and put some software on it that allows Rose to remotely access whatever is on it. That way, when the drive is opened up and the encryption is taken off, Rose will be able to access all of the files and wipe it clean. Peter's really hesitant to do this because if he gets caught with his past regarding his dad, it's not going to be a good look. But Rose convinces him that it is the best move. Right before they go their separate ways, they agree on a meetup spot, and then Peter moseys on into the White House and starts phase 1 of this plan. After debriefing Diane and handing over the drive, he texts Rose that the police are after her. They have a description of what she looks like, so lay low. She decides to do that in a diner. Probably not the best place considering cops eat there, but it is a place with Wi-Fi that she can use so that when Peter does put that spyware into Diane's computer, Rose will be easily able to access it. In order to do that, though, they're going to have to distract Diane, which means Rose is going to have to call the night agent phone line and get Diane on that phone, which will allow Peter to swipe Diane's badge to get into her office. While Diane sits in that windowless room, unaware of the fact that she's getting played, Peter jumps into action. He tells Diane that he's going off to track Rose's phone when in reality he's sneaking off to go to Diane's office. Following the instruction that Rose gives him, he puts in that spyware and it allows Rose to grab all of the files before she's caught. When it's all done, Rose just hangs up on Diane, telling her that she's not coming in. As soon as Rose got the files, she left that diner. She wasn't going to stick around. She had to get to a safe space to find out what was on those files. There is a problem, though. Peter really messed up. He left the flash drive in Diane's computer, and Diane quickly realizes what happened. She goes and confronts Peter about it because she feels completely betrayed. She can't believe she trusted him, and now it turns out he's working for somebody else. But the whole thing was just a giant miscommunication because Peter obviously thought that he couldn't trust Diane. He explains himself to Diane, tells her why they thought that she was after him, and he's got a pretty good reason. She was the only one who knew where they were. But it turns out Diane didn't send those people. What she fears is that her phone has spyware on it, and that somebody was tracking her, listening to her calls, and was able to figure out where Peter and Rose were. They decide to put all their cards on the table. Diane fills Peter in on exactly what she heard from the president regarding what was going on with Rose's aunt and uncle. She doesn't know who this mole is in the White House, but clearly they're senior enough to get spyware on her phone. Peter then tells Diane the plan with Rose grabbing the files, and since they seem to be on the same side, Peter and Diane go to link up with Rose at the motel that Rose went to comb over what she could find. She was able to find an address for a place. She writes that down. But she's surprised when there's a knock at her door and it's Peter, but also Diane, because at this point, she doesn't know that she can trust Diane. Peter urges Rose, though, to just hear Diane out, and Diane says, if you want answers, I've got some. Now, while Diane is filling Rose in on what her aunt and uncle were up to, Ben Almora, the head of the Secret Service, was on another mission. He called up one of his agents named Chelsea Arrington. She's in charge of the detail regarding the vice president's daughter. He tells Chelsea that he's sending over an agent named Eric Monks to be on that detail. Eric Monks is a Secret Service legend. He took a bullet for the president. He's been on rehab. And Almora tells Chelsea that he just wants to kind of integrate Monks slowly back into the role. So he's going to put him on what usually would be looked at as a thankless, low-level detail. Chelsea's pretty young, but she takes her job very, very seriously. She's also built a really good rapport with Maddie Redfield, the vice president's daughter, who's at Georgetown. Double major, studying poli-sci and art. She's trying to be as normal of a student as possible, but it is tough with a security detail. It's something that she really appreciates about Chelsea, the fact that Chelsea at least tries to blend in with other students and look somewhat inconspicuous. Chelsea fills Eric Monks in on all the details regarding Maddie, her schedule and whatnot. But the first night on the job, Eric really screws up. There's a guy that recognizes Maddie at a club, and he accosts her. Eric acted too slowly, and this perpetrator ended up getting hands on Maddie, which is a big, big no-no. While she doesn't want to do it, Chelsea has to rat out Monks to Almora. Chelsea doesn't think Monks is ready. but Ben Almora does. But they have a past. Ben Almora and Monks used to be partners. So whether Chelsea likes it or not, Monks is going to stay on the detail. This whole situation, though, reeks. Chelsea meets with one of her friends at the CIA, and she asks him for a favor. She wants to know why exactly Eric Monks has been assigned to this detail. She doesn't believe what Almora is telling her. But it might have to do with what's going down in 5 days. Maddie, being an art major, had to take some art classes. And one particular class, the teacher's a little too friendly. It's nothing major, but, hand on the small of the back. Maddie really likes it, but it's all part of a plan. Because this teacher is a plan. He was sent there to gain Maddie's trust, and then God knows what. But he's getting pressured to speed it up. And all that pressure is coming from the guy with the snake tattoo. The same guy that planted the bomb on the DC Metro. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.